Thanks for staying with us. South Africa's ambassador to Denmark, Zindzi Mandela, has unleashed a political storm with a tweet on the land debate. On Friday, Nelson Mandela's daughter tweeted, "Dear apartheid apologists, your time is over. You will not rule again. We do not fear you. Finally, hashtag the land is ours." Responses to a comment on the sensitive issue varied, with some calling for her diplomatic recall. Now, Charles Sinkala is an international relations expert, and he joins us now live. Charles, thank you so much for coming in. Obviously, as we live in a time of social media, these kinds of things have a way of taking on a life of its own. Is there a social media policy that those working for the Foreign Affairs Department in the diplomatic corps, as it were, is there social media a policy that they are supposed to adhere to?
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, there's a diplomatic corps, if you remember the 1961 Vienna Convention, stipulates the ethics and the integrity of these representatives. They call them public representatives. On her level, she's actually representing South Africa. So there's a fine line between her personal opinion and South Africa's opinion. It's very fine. So whatever she says, it is derived as a South African perspective. So that's why it is very important for those in public office to be very careful in terms of establishing their opinion, especially on the social media. She might mean well, but, the people, South Africa has been divided. And because of the past, people still have those souls, so they may take offense.
When you look at that policy from an international best practice point of view, how then do we balance that out with the right to free speech?
Yes, her speech is not that, like the way people have blown it. She was just trying to hear her views. We must also understand her past experience, where she's coming from. She came from a politically broken house, where her father was incarcerated for a long time during her childhood life. She lived that. She still has that trauma in herself, and she hasn't come to terms. Only time will heal her. But even having said that, as a public representative, she needs to, contain her emotions, to address things the way they are in terms of healing South Africa. It has been a policy for the African National Congress and South Africa at large to create a rainbow nation, to inclusively, to not take sides of the apartheid or condemn whatever. There was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and all those issues were addressed. So if one will come out on one-sided as a public figure, I think that is very bad, especially to the international community, especially when she talks about the land issue, which is very sensitive at this stage.
Now, when you're looking at how this kind of thing could be perceived internationally, we're dealing with an interesting case with regards to a South African man who posted a video while in Greece and used racial language and has now ended up in court. And what was interesting from a legal point of view is that he would face the legalities on this side in South Africa, but also in Greece, because that's where he was when he filmed this video and posted it on the internet. That must make it increasingly difficult and complex for those who work in international relations like you do, in terms of how they can or are able to behave on social media. Would perhaps, for instance, if she's working in Denmark as the South African ambassador, how do their laws pertain to the laws or the regulations laid out for the social media policy for the ambassadors, no matter where they're posted?
Exactly. Thank you very much. You must remember that the freedom of speech starts and ends where another person's freedom of speech starts as well. So whatever the freedom of speech can be, you must consider other people's feelings. You can, there are also regulations and laws as well which governs the performance, the ethics and the technical aspect of them representing the country or working within that foreign country of the receiving. They've got laws of how somebody has to conduct themselves. And I'm sure they must have someone there. Here, Nelson Mandela Foundation has someone there as well, because this hasn't been the perspective of building South Africa to go forward. You know, the international community, the investors as well, they're very wary and fragile. You know, they pick up with sentiments like this, you know, which doesn't solidify their commitment in terms of investing in the country. You remember very well this affects the inflation of the country. It affects all society, including the general public as well. From the other side, where she's marginalized and saying this and that, they also wants to defend back, you know, because we've got South Africans who are non-blacks, you know, we've got South Africans of different races. As I said earlier, it's a rainbow nation, so they will also want to defend their side. But talking of the international community, I think it hasn't been received very well. You know, I think she has to stand up and apologize so that we can move on from there.
Okay.